We're reducing your hours to 10 per week. The words didn't hit me like a slap. They hit me like a slow leak in a tire. You don't realize you're in danger until you're already spinning off the road. Hopefully you understand, he added. He didn't wait for me to answer. He didn't even look at me. He just leaned back in his expensive chair, tapping a gold pen against his chin. The chair creaked. It was a big, black leather thing that cost more than my first car. He looked bored. He looked like a man who had already decided what he was going to have for lunch, and I was just a wrapper he needed to throw away before he could eat. He wanted me to quit. That was the game. I saw it in the way he wouldn't meet my gaze. He wanted me to get angry, scream, or cry so he could fire me for cause and avoid paying unemployment. I didn't give him that satisfaction. I sat there, looking at the man who had taken over the business 3 months ago. His name was Bricks. He was 30 years old, wore suits that were too tight in the shoulders, and had teeth that were too white to be real. He was the son of the founder. Bricks knew nothing about what we actually did. He didn't know the smell of solvent or the weight of a respirator. He only knew numbers. And he decided my salary was a number he didn't like. 10 hours? I asked, keeping my voice very steady. That is the final decision? Effective immediately, he said. He picked up a piece of paper on his desk, pretending to read it. The schedule is already updated for next week. You come in Monday for 2 hours, then we see where we fit you in. If that doesn't work for your lifestyle, well, he shrugged. He was enjoying this. He liked the power. He liked watching a woman who had worked here for 10 years squirm because he held the purse strings. I didn't beg. I didn't ask how I was supposed to pay my mortgage. I simply nodded, stood up, and walked out. He thought he had won. He thought he had squeezed me out. He thought I was just another middle-aged employee he could bully into resigning so he could replace me with a cheaper college kid. What he didn't know was that he had just pulled the pin on a grenade he was holding in his own lap. And the explosion? It wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be total. Before I tell you what was inside the folder I brought back on Monday, and how his face melted when he read it, I just want to say thank you for being here. It means a lot to share this with people who understand what it's like to be undervalued. If you've ever had a boss who thought they were a king just because they sat in the big chair, go ahead and hit that like button and maybe subscribe if you want to hear more stories about people getting exactly what they deserve. My name is Hannah. I am not a loud person. I don't like drama. I drive a sedan that is 5 years old. I pay my bills on time, and I follow the rules. Some people think following rules makes you boring. In my line of work, following rules keeps your skin from melting off your bones. To understand why Bricks made the biggest mistake of his life, you have to understand what I do. I don't work in marketing. I don't sell things. I work in a very specific, dangerous, and boring field. Industrial chemical compliance for historical restoration. That sounds fancy, but here's the reality. Our company restores massive, old government buildings. We don't just paint walls. We strip away lead paint, asbestos, and decades of toxic grime. To do this, we use chemicals that are so regulated, the government tracks every ounce. We use solvents that can turn a pair of heavy-duty work boots into a puddle of rubber if you spill a drop. We store drums of liquid that, if they caught fire, would require the evacuation of 3 city blocks. This isn't stuff you buy at the hardware store. This is stuff that requires a federal background check just to order. I wasn't just a manager. I was the designated license holder. This title matters. It matters more than CEO or president. Years ago, I spent nights and weekends studying for a state certification that is incredibly hard to get. Most people fail it the first time. I didn't. It requires passing a 4-part exam and logging 5,000 hours of supervised safety work. 5,000 hours. That is years of walking job sites, checking ventilation, measuring fume levels, and signing off on manifests. Because I held this certificate, the company was allowed to buy and store these specific solvents. My license was the key. Without the key, you can't drive the car. The old owner, Bricks's father, knew this. His name was Otis. Otis was a good man. He had rough hands and a loud laugh. He started the company with a pickup truck and a ladder. He respected the chemicals. He respected the danger. He paid me well because my license was the legal shield for the entire company. He knew that if I walked out the door, his ability to operate legally walked out with me. But Otis retired. He moved to Florida to fish and drink iced tea, and he handed the keys to the kingdom to his son. The son? He never read the operations manual. Bricks came in with an MBA and a lot of ideas about efficiency. He looked at the payroll and saw my name near the top. He didn't see Legal Shield. He just saw safety director on the payroll and thought, I can do safety. He thought my job was checking fire extinguishers. He thought I walked around with a clipboard making sure people were wearing their hard hats. He said to me once, in our first meeting, I don't need to pay her for 40 hours just to walk around with a clipboard. He saw me as a cost, a fat line item on his spreadsheet that was keeping him from buying a new boat. So he cut me. I went home that Friday and sat on my couch. The house was quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I felt sick. My hands were trembling, not from anger, but from fear of losing my house. I am a single woman. I don't have a safety net. If I stop getting paid, the lights go out. Bricks knew that. He was counting on it. He wanted me desperate. I sat there for an hour, staring at the wall. I thought about calling Rico, the foreman. Rico was a good guy, loyal. He would be furious. But what could he do? Bricks was the owner. Then I stood up to get a glass of water. As I walked down the hallway, I passed the frame. I looked at the framed certificate hanging in my hallway. It was simple. Cream-colored paper. Gold foil seal of the State Department of Environmental Safety. My name, Hannah, printed in bold black letters. I stopped. I looked at the date. I looked at the license number. I walked over to it and read the small print at the bottom. There is a lot of text on these licenses. Most people never read it. I hadn't read it in years, but something in the back of my brain, some dusty memory from my exam prep 5 years ago, started to itch. Paragraph 4, Section B. I went to my bookshelf. I keep all my reference materials there. I pulled out the state handbook from my shelf. It's a thick binder, blue plastic, heavy as a brick. I flipped through the pages. The paper was thin and smelled like dust. I found the section on storage of Class A volatile solvents. I read the law again. I read it 3 times to be sure. My heart had been hammering in my chest since I left the office. But as I read those words, the hammering stopped. A calm feeling washed over me. It wasn't happiness. It was colder than that. It was the feeling of watching a car speed past you on an icy road, knowing they are going to slide into the ditch around the bend. You can't stop them. You can't help them. You just watch. Because physics is physics. Bricks had cut my hours to 10. According to state law, for a facility of our size to store Class A volatile solvents, the designated license holder must be present on site for a minimum of 32 hours per week. 32 hours. That was the magic number. Not 40, not 10, 32. The law exists for a reason. These chemicals are unstable. They need daily monitoring. The state requires a qualified expert to be physically present for the majority of the work week to ensure the containment units don't fail. If the license holder drops below 32 hours, the facility is no longer a secure site. It automatically downgrades to a storage facility, and storage facilities are legally prohibited from opening any chemical containers. If you are a storage facility, you can hold the drums. You can look at the drums, but you cannot unscrew the cap. You cannot pour the solvent. You cannot load it into a van. You cannot use it. If you do, you are operating an unlicensed hazardous waste site. That is not a violation. That is a felony. I closed the book. I didn't call him. I didn't email him to warn him. Why would I? He made it clear he didn't want to hear from me. He had told me, to my face, that I was useless. He had told me my job was a joke. If I called him now and said, "Hey, Bricks, you can't do this because of the law," he would have laughed. He would have said I was making things up to keep my salary. He would have called me a liar. So I let him be right. I went to my computer. I opened the browser and went to the State Labor Board website. I didn't file a complaint about my hours. I didn't cry about unfair dismissal. I did something much more bureaucratic. I filed a change of status form. It is a simple form. It asks for your license number, your employer, and your current weekly hours. It tells the state, I, the license holder, am now working part-time. I typed in the number, 10 hours. The screen asked me to confirm. Are you sure? A reduction below 32 hours will result in immediate reclassification of the facility. I clicked, yes. I hit submit. The system processed it instantly. The state computer didn't care about Brix's profit margins. It didn't care about the library contract. It just saw the data. Hours is less than 32. Status equals downgraded. It was done. I slept better that night than I had in months. Monday morning arrived. I walked in at 8 a.m. sharp. The air in the office was different. It usually smelled like stale coffee and floor wax. Today, it smelled like money. The office was buzzing. I could hear the noise from the back. The crews were in the warehouse, prepping the vans. I heard the clang of metal drums being rolled onto the lifts. I heard Rico shouting orders. They were loading up the solvent drums for a huge project at the city library, a contract worth millions. This was the job that was going to make Bricks famous. It was the first big contract he had landed since taking over from Otis. He had underbid everyone else to get it. He needed this to go perfectly. I walked past the reception desk. The receptionist, Jana, looked at me with sad eyes. She knew what had happened on Friday. She whispered, "I'm sorry, Hana." I just smiled at her. "It's okay, Jana. Really." I walked into the main area. The boss was standing by the coffee machine, looking proud. He was wearing a new suit, gray this time. He was holding a mug that said, "Boss" on it. When he saw me, he checked his watch. "Glad you decided to show up," he said, his voice dripping with fake politeness. He wanted an audience. He spoke loudly so the other office workers could hear. He wanted everyone to know that Hana, the big bad safety director, was now just a part-time nobody. "You have 2 hours. I want you to organize the supply closet." He pointed a finger toward the back room where we kept the paper towels and staples. He was trying to humiliate me. He wanted the highly paid specialist to sort paper clips. He wanted to break me. He wanted me to throw a fit and walk out so he could say, "See? She wasn't a team player." I didn't blink. "I can do that," I said. I reached into my bag. "But first, I need to give you this." I handed him a thick, yellow envelope. It wasn't from me. It was the mail I had picked up from the front desk on my way in. Jana had handed it to me, along with the rest of the pile. But this one was special. It had the official state seal on it, the eagle with the arrows. The stamp was red. Bricks looked at it. He frowned. He didn't take it at first. He looked at the envelope like it was a piece of trash I had found on the floor. "What is this?" he asked, annoyed. "It's from the Labor Board and the Department of Environmental Safety," I said. My voice was calm. I wasn't shouting. I was speaking with the flat, boring tone of a bureaucrat. "Since you changed my status to part-time on Friday, I was legally required to update my license registration over the weekend." Bricks scoffed. He actually laughed a little, a short, sharp bark of a laugh. "I don't care about your license registration," he said. He grabbed the envelope from my hand. "That's your problem, not." He ripped the envelope open. He was rough with it. He tore the top off and crumpled it. He pulled out the paper inside. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a white piece of paper. He pulled out a bright orange piece of paper. In our industry, orange means one thing: danger. Stop. Do not proceed. It was a cease and desist order. Bricks stopped talking. He looked at the header. He looked at the bold black letters at the top. Order of immediate suspension. His face went gray. It wasn't a figure of speech. I watched the pink, healthy color of his skin drain away until he looked like wet dough. It looked like the blood just drained out of his head. The office went quiet. Jana had stopped typing. The hum of the refrigerator seemed very loud. "What is this?" he whispered. He wasn't using his boss voice anymore. He sounded like a child who had broken a vase. "Read the second paragraph," I said softly. He didn't want to read it. I could see his eyes darting around the page, trying to find an escape hatch, but there wasn't one. He read it out loud, his voice shaking. "Pursuant to State Code 77B, reduction of designated license holder hours below the mandatory threshold of 32 hours results in the immediate suspension of the operational use permit." He stopped. He choked on the words. He looked up at me. The arrogance was gone. The smirk was gone. The boss mug was tilting in his hand, about to spill coffee on his expensive shoes. "Suspension?" he asked. I took a step closer. I wanted him to hear this clearly. I wanted there to be no misunderstanding. "It means," I explained, "that as of 8 a.m. this morning, this building is not a licensed worksite. It is just a warehouse." I pointed toward the back, where the sounds of the crew were still echoing. "You cannot open those drums. You cannot load the vans. You cannot send those crews to the library." Bricks looked out the window. He could see the vans lined up. He could see Rico lifting a 50-gallon drum of solvent onto the truck bed. "But," Bricks stammered, "we have a deadline. The city expects us to start today. If one drop of that solvent leaves this property while I am a part-time employee, I said, it is a federal crime. I paused. I let the words land. Not a fine, I said. A crime. You go to prison. He stared at the paper. His hand started shaking so hard the paper rattled. It was a distinctive sound, the crinkle of stiff paper, vibrating in a terrified man's grip. Fix it, he snapped. Panic makes people irrational. He thought he could order the law to go away. He thought he could command the state of Ohio like he commanded his secretary. Call them, he yelled. Tell them it was a mistake. I'll put you back to 40 hours. He reached for the phone on the desk. I shook my head. It doesn't work like that, I said. The license is suspended. To reinstate it, you have to apply for a recertification audit. Audit? He repeated. The state has to come out and inspect the facility again, I said. The wait list is 6 weeks. He dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing bright orange against the gray carpet. 6 weeks? He whispered. We lose the library contract if we don't start today. We lose everything. He looked at me. He was pleading now. He was begging me to pull a magic wand out of my purse and make the consequences of his own greed disappear. I know, I said. I checked my own watch, a cheap plastic one. And since I only work 10 hours now, my shift is over in 90 minutes. I'll be in the supply closet. I turned my back on him. I walked toward the supply closet. I didn't organize the paper clips. I sat on a stool in the back, surrounded by boxes of toner and toilet paper. I sat there for 90 minutes. I could hear everything. The walls were thin. I heard him scream at Jana to get the state board on the phone. I heard him get put on hold. I heard the music playing on the speakerphone. I heard him begging a clerk. I heard him crying. He wasn't crying because he was sorry. He was crying because he was losing. I just sat there, listening. It was the most peaceful 90 minutes of my life, but the story doesn't end with him crying on the phone. That was just the beginning of the collapse. Because when you play games with federal regulations, you don't just lose a contract. You lose your shield. And Bricks? He had no idea that while he was crying on the phone, the insurance company was already printing a letter that would turn his bad day into a complete nightmare. You see, there was one tiny detail I hadn't told him yet, a detail about what happens to your insurance policy the second your permit is suspended. And I knew that Rico had already loaded 3 vans before Bricks ran out to stop him. That meant the chemicals had been in transit during a suspension, and that changed everything. I walked out of the supply closet exactly 90 minutes later. I placed the last box of staples on the shelf. I lined up the pens. I did the job he assigned me to do. When I stepped back into the main office, the silence was heavy. It wasn't the quiet of a library. It was the quiet of a funeral parlor. Bricks was still at his desk. He was slumped over, his forehead resting on the polished wood. The phone receiver was dangling off the hook by its cord, swaying back and forth. A low beep, beep, beep sound came from it, signaling that the call had ended a long time ago. He hadn't fixed it. I walked past his desk. I didn't stop. I didn't say goodbye. I picked up my purse from under my old desk, the one that was now empty, and walked toward the exit. Where are you going? His voice was croaky. He didn't lift his head. My shift is over, I said. I worked my 2 hours. See you next Monday. I walked out into the parking lot. The sun was shining. The birds were singing. It felt strange that the world was so normal when the building behind me was imploding. I drove home. I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove, feeling the vibration of the steering wheel under my palms. For the next 3 days, I didn't hear a word. I stayed home. I worked in my garden. I pulled weeds. There is something very satisfying about pulling a weed out by the root. You have to be patient. If you pull too fast, the stem breaks and the root stays. You have to wait, loosen the soil, and then pop. The whole thing comes out. Bricks was the weed, and the soil was loosening. On Wednesday, my phone rang. It wasn't Bricks. It was Rico, the foreman. Hannah, he said. His voice sounded tired. You need to tell me what's going on. The gates are locked. There are chains on the warehouse doors. The boss is running around screaming about audits. The license is suspended, Rico, I told him. The facility isn't legal anymore. Rico let out a long breath. I knew it. I told the guys something was wrong. We loaded those vans on Monday morning. And then 10 minutes later, Bricks runs out waving his arms, telling us to unload everything. He looked like he was having a heart attack. Did you unload it? I asked. Yeah, Rico said. But Hannah, we worked Saturday. My stomach tightened. I knew they had worked Saturday. That was the schedule. But hearing Rico say it made it real. I know, I said. Bricks told us to come in and prep the drums, Rico said. He said he wanted a head start on the library job. We moved about 40 barrels. Mixed the solution for the first stage. I wasn't there, Rico, I said. I was part-time as of Friday evening. I know you weren't there, Rico said. That's the problem. We had a spill. I closed my eyes. How bad? I asked. Not big, Rico said. Maybe a gallon. Mike tripped near the loading dock. The drum tipped. We contained it. We used the spill kits. We cleaned it up. But you know the rules. We have to log it. We have to file an incident report with the EPA and the insurance carrier. Did Bricks file the report? I asked. He said he would handle it Monday, Rico said. But then Monday happened, and now the gates are locked. I thanked Rico and hung up. I sat there, staring at the phone. A spill on Saturday. Bricks had cut my hours on Friday. The state computer updated my status Friday night. That meant on Saturday, when the crew was moving dangerous chemicals, the facility was already downgraded to a storage facility. They were legally prohibited from opening or moving those drums. And they had a spill. This was the moment the trap snapped shut. You see, commercial liability insurance for hazardous materials is very specific. It has a clause. I know this clause because I wrote the compliance section of our policy renewal 3 years ago. Clause 11A, validity of coverage. Coverage is void ab initio if the insured entity operates without valid state and federal permits. If you drive a car without a license and you crash, the insurance company doesn't pay. If you run a chemical plant without a license and you have a spill, the insurance company doesn't pay. But it gets worse. Because Bricks had ordered the work on Saturday, knowing, or refusing to know, that I wasn't there, he had committed gross negligence. I waited. The explosion happened on Thursday. I found out later from Jana what happened. She told me the story over coffee a month later, and she was still laughing about it. The insurance adjuster had arrived at the office on Thursday morning. Bricks had called them to report the spill, thinking it was a standard claim. He thought the insurance would cover the cleanup costs and the mandatory soil testing. The adjuster was a man named Gareth. Gareth was a stickler. He asked to see the daily logs. He saw the log for Saturday. He saw the spill report. Then he asked, who was the designated license holder on site during this shift? Bricks had tried to lie. He said, Hannah is the holder. She's on the payroll. Gareth asked, was she physically present? Bricks said, she's a manager. She doesn't need to be here every second. Gareth checked the state database. He saw the change of status, timestamped Friday, at 5 p.m. Jana said Gareth didn't yell. He didn't get angry. He just closed his laptop. He handed Bricks a letter. It wasn't a check. It was a denial of coverage. And then he handed him a second letter, a notice of policy cancellation. Because the facility had operated illegally for 1 day, the entire policy was void. Bricks was now personally liable. The spill was small, but the cleanup wasn't. Because it happened on a loading dock, the solvent had seeped into the concrete and the soil beneath. The EPA requires core sampling. They require excavation of contaminated soil. They require disposal in sealed containers at a specialized facility 3 states over. The bill for the cleanup was $42,000. The fine from the EPA for an unreported spill at an unlicensed facility was $75,000. The fine from the State Labor Board for operating without a license holder was $10,000 per day. And the city council didn't just cancel the contract. They sued. They had closed the library for the week to prepare for our arrival. They had moved books. They had rented temporary storage. When Bricks couldn't start on Monday, and then couldn't start on Tuesday, they declared him in material breach. They sued for damages. They sued for the cost of the delay. Bricks was staring at a mountain of debt that was close to $500,000. And because the insurance was void, he had to pay it out of the company accounts. But the company accounts were empty. He had spent the cash reserves on his new office furniture, his new lease on a luxury car, and a branding consultant to redesign the logo. He had no cash flow. The 6-week wait for the audit meant 0 revenue for 6 weeks. He couldn't make payroll on Friday. I didn't go in on Monday for my 2 hours. There was no point. The building was dark. Bricks went bankrupt in less than a month. It was a fast, brutal collapse. The bank seized the accounts. The landlord locked the building. The creditors descended like vultures. I watched it all from a distance. I saw the auction listing online, liquidation sale, industrial equipment, office furniture, vehicles. I saw the photo of his big leather chair on the auction site. Current bid, $50. I saw the vans. I saw the computers. And I saw the building itself listed for sale. Bricks lost everything. He lost the company his father built. He lost his car. He likely lost his personal savings because he had signed personal guarantees on the business loans. He was gone, but the building remained. The chemicals were still there, locked in the warehouse, waiting, and the market still needed the work done. The library still needed to be restored. The government building still needed lead abatement. 3 months later, a large national engineering firm bought the building. They bought the assets for pennies on the dollar. They were a serious company. They had offices in Chicago and New York. They knew the business. And they did their homework. They looked at the compliance records. They saw that for 10 years, the facility had a perfect safety record. They saw my name on every single report. They saw that the only time the company failed was the week I was removed. They called me. I remember the interview. It was with a woman named Ilara. She was sharp, professional, and wore a suit that actually fit. "We know what happened," Ilara said. She didn't beat around the bush. "We reviewed the state filings. We saw the change of status form. You filed it the day he cut your hours." I nodded. "I followed the law." Ilara smiled. It was a real smile. "That's exactly why we want you. We need someone who follows the law, even when it's inconvenient. Especially when it's inconvenient." They hired me on the spot. They didn't offer me my old job back. They offered me a promotion. "Senior compliance officer," Ilara said. "Regional director." My new salary was double what it was before. And the first thing I did, I asked for the budget to hire a crew. "Do you have anyone in mind?" Ilara asked. "Yes," I said. I called Rico. I called the rest of the guys. They had been out of work for months, picking up odd jobs. When I told them the pay rate, which was also higher, because this new company actually valued skilled labor, Rico almost dropped the phone. We were back. We walked into the warehouse a week later. It felt like reclaiming a captured ship. We cut the locks. We turned on the lights. I walked into my old office. Well, Brix's old office. It was mine now. The big leather chair was gone. The new company had put in a sensible, ergonomic mesh chair. I sat down. It was comfortable. We got the library contract back. We finished the job in record time. The city was happy. The state was happy. I was happy. I never heard from Brix. I didn't look for him. He was just a bad memory, a lesson in what happens when arrogance meets regulation. But the universe has a funny way of closing loops. A year later, I was traveling for a conference. I flew into Denver for a symposium on hazardous material containment. I landed late. It was snowing. I was tired. I walked to the rental car center. The line was long. I waited for 20 minutes, checking my emails on my phone. Finally, it was my turn. I walked up to the counter. "Next guest, please," a voice called out. I looked up. The man behind the counter was wearing a bright red polo shirt with the rental company logo. He had a name tag pinned crookedly to his chest. Brix. He looked older. He looked tired. His hair was thinning, and that fake, bright white smile was gone. He looked like a man who spent 8 hours a day getting yelled at by people who wanted an upgrade. He was typing on the computer, not looking up yet. "Last name?" he asked, his voice mechanical. "Hana," I said. His hands froze on the keyboard. He stopped typing. Slowly, very slowly, he lifted his head. Our eyes met. He looked at me. He looked at my suit. It was a nice suit, tailored. He looked at the heavy wool coat over my arm. He looked at the platinum frequent flyer tag on my briefcase. He looked at his own red polo shirt. His face turned a shade of pink I hadn't seen since that day in his office. He didn't speak. He couldn't. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. I didn't smile. I didn't smirk. I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't need to. The reality of the moment was louder than any words. He was working at a car rental counter at the airport. I handed him my license and credit card. "Just for 2 days," I said. "Mid-size is fine." He looked at the license. It was the same driver's license he had on file when he was my boss. He looked at the credit card. It was a corporate black card. He swallowed hard. I could see his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. He took the card. His hand was trembling. He just typed on the computer, looking down, his hands still shaking slightly as he handed me the keys. "Thank you," I said. I took the keys. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I walked out into the cold Denver air, got into my rental car, and drove to my hotel. I slept like a baby. That's the story. He wanted to save a few dollars by cutting the expert. He ended up paying with his entire life. It's a simple lesson, really. If you think safety is expensive, try an accident. And if you think the person holding the license is just walking around with a clipboard, you better make sure you know what's written on that clipboard before you try to take it away. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed watching a bad boss get exactly what was coming to him, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And let me know in the comments, have you ever had a boss who tried to cut corners and got burned? I read every comment. Stay safe out there. We all agreed. "You're not welcome at the product launch," my manager said with a smirk. "The higher-ups want a certain image for the event, and frankly, we need the space for potential investors." The conference room felt suddenly too small, too airless. 6 months of my life, gone in a single sentence. 6 months of staying until midnight, of canceled weekend plans and skipped family gatherings. 6 months where I'd transformed their failing travel device into something that actually worked. "Good to know," I replied, transferring the $8,600 marketing budget back to my personal account with a few taps on my phone. "I'll also be canceling the Globetrotter partnerships I secured. They were agreements with me personally, not the company." I looked up from my phone to see his face drain of color. "You can't do that. I already have." Before I continue my story, if you're enjoying this so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories like this one. Your support means everything. And comments let me know what resonates with you. Now, back to the day, everything changed. My name is Finola, and until that moment in the conference room, I'd been the navigation specialist who saved Project Wayfinder from total failure. Before I joined, their revolutionary travel device was malfunctioning 90% of the time, rendering it completely useless for anyone venturing beyond cellular service. I wasn't supposed to be their savior. Actually, I almost didn't get the job. During my interview, the technical director, Cameron, kept interrupting me with "actually" and "technically speaking" before repeating exactly what I'd just said. My manager-to-be, Lyle, spent more time looking at my resume than at me. "You have an interesting background," he'd said, in a tone that suggested interesting wasn't a compliment. I developed my navigation algorithm while working alone in my apartment after my previous employer shuttered during the economic downturn. It was my passion project, connecting to satellites in a completely new way that required minimal power and provided pinpoint accuracy even in remote areas. When they offered me the job, the salary was lower than I'd hoped, but I accepted anyway. The project was perfect for my algorithm, and I believed in what we were building, a device that could save lives. The first 3 months were promising. The team seemed impressed by how quickly I integrated my navigation method into their device, improving its success rate from 10% to 85%. I worked weekends refining it to 100% reliability. I remember the moment it first worked perfectly, 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'd been in the office for 19 straight hours and danced around the empty room when the test succeeded. "This is game-changing," my colleague Aaron had said the next morning, examining my results. "How did you solve the satellite connectivity issues so efficiently?" Before I could answer, Lyle appeared behind us. "Team effort," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder that felt more possessive than congratulatory. The direction I suggested really pulled things together. I frowned. "What direction was that, Lyle?" He laughed as if I'd told a joke and walked away without answering. That was the first red flag. Others followed quickly. In our weekly development meetings, Lyle began presenting my progress as our approach and the team's solution, never mentioning my name. When important investors visited, I was asked to let the business team handle explanations, despite being the only one who truly understood how the technology worked. Then, 4 months in, came the marketing crisis. "We're pulling funding for the final marketing push," Lyle announced. "The board thinks we should wait until next quarter, but we promised the Globetrotter partnerships. I protested. 5 exclusive adventure companies agreed to feature us based on that timeline. Sometimes business decisions change, Lyle said with a shrug. That night, I couldn't sleep. The device worked. It could genuinely save lives. Adventurers needed it. And the partnerships I'd cultivated would put it in the hands of people who could spread the word globally. The next morning, I made a decision that would eventually lead to my downfall, or my liberation, depending on how you look at it. I'll fund the marketing myself, I told Lyle. I believe in this product enough to invest $8,600 of my own money. His eyes widened with surprise, then narrowed with calculation. That's very generous, Finola. Weekends became business trips. I flew to meet with the Globetrotter companies, elite adventure outfitters who catered to wealthy thrill seekers worldwide. I demonstrated the device personally, answering technical questions no one else on the team could have addressed. Your passion is convincing, said Astor, the CEO of North Star Expeditions. Most tech people can't explain why their gadgets matter. You make me believe this could save my clients' lives. One by one, all 5 companies signed exclusive partnership agreements. With me, personally, not with the company, a detail I didn't think mattered at the time. When I returned with the signed agreements, something had shifted. Lyle took the contracts without thanking me. At the celebration happy hour, I was seated at the far end of the table, away from the executives. I started noticing closed-door meetings I wasn't invited to. My name disappeared from project updates. The marketing materials showcased everyone but me. Then came the moment that changed everything. I had forgotten my water bottle and returned to the office after hours. Passing by the conference room, I heard Lyle's voice. After launch, we'll phase her out completely. We've got what we needed from her. The navigation technique is documented now, and we don't need her explaining it anymore. What about the Globetrotter contacts? Asked a voice I recognized as Cameron's. They're partnership agreements with the company, not with her personally, Lyle replied. I froze outside the door. He was wrong. The agreement specifically named me as the point of contact with exclusive presentation rights. And my navigation algorithm? I'd developed it before joining the company. My contract included intellectual property protections I'd insisted on. They had usage rights, not ownership. That night, I scoured my contract, confirming what I already knew. The navigation method remained legally mine. The marketing money was still in my personal account because the finance department hadn't processed the transfer yet, and the Globetrotter partnerships were tied directly to me. For 2 weeks, I said nothing, did nothing. I smiled in meetings while Lyle took credit for my work. I nodded when executives spoke about our navigation solution, and I consulted my mentor, Kendra, who had guided me through my career since university. Document everything, she advised, and wait for them to show their true colors completely. The true colors emerged exactly 7 days before launch. We all agreed. You're not welcome at the product launch, Lyle said with that smirk I'll never forget. The higher-ups want a certain image for the event, and frankly, we need the space for potential investors. After I left the conference room, after I transferred back my marketing money and canceled the partnerships, I sent one final email, a formal notice reclaiming my intellectual property and revoking their right to use my navigation algorithm. Then I went home, turned off my phone, and slept better than I had in months. Morning brought 28 missed calls and one message that would change everything. By the time I checked my phone, the company's damage control machine was in full swing. The first 20 calls were from various members of the leadership team, their messages evolving from confusion to anger to desperation as the hours passed. What have you done? Cameron's voice sounded panicked. The demo isn't working. Nothing's connecting to the satellites. Lyle's messages started with threats. This is grounds for legal action. Then shifted to bribes by the afternoon. We can negotiate a better title, higher compensation. The 28th call was from him too, left at 3:14 a.m. You've ruined us. The investors walked out. This is career suicide, Finola. No one will hire you after this. But it was the 27th call, from an unknown number, that caught my attention. My name is Yvonne Trellis. I attended your company's product launch yesterday as a potential investor. I watched the demonstration fail spectacularly. And more interestingly, I watched how the team handled the crisis. No one could explain what went wrong because, I suspect, no one understood how it worked in the first place. Your mentor Kendra mentioned you might be available for a conversation about new opportunities. Call me when you're ready to lead, rather than follow. I replayed the message twice. Kendra had been at the launch, and she'd spoken to investors about me. My phone rang while I was still processing this. Kendra, I hope you slept well, she said when I answered. You've caused quite the earthquake. You were there? At the launch? Of course. I wouldn't miss watching Karma in action. I could hear the smile in her voice. Yvonne called you? Yes, but call her back, today. And Finola? Don't agree to anything with your old company. Not yet. I followed her advice, calling Yvonne immediately after. That was quick, Yvonne answered. Good. I don't like waiting. Her voice had a crisp efficiency that matched her message. No small talk. No wasted words. I understand you developed the navigation algorithm that was supposed to be demonstrated yesterday, she said. I did, and I own the intellectual property. Smart. Even smarter to protect yourself legally from the beginning. Tell me, what did you envision for this technology beyond a gadget for wealthy adventurers? The question caught me off guard. For months, I'd been so focused on making the device work. I hadn't allowed myself to dream bigger. It could help search and rescue teams locate people more efficiently, I said. Guide medical supply deliveries to remote areas. Even assist disaster response when traditional infrastructure fails. Exactly, she replied. Which is why I have no interest in investing in a company that sees it merely as a luxury item for thrill seekers. I run the Artemis Group. We develop technology with humanitarian applications. I'd like you to consider joining us, with full ownership of your intellectual property and leading your own development team. What about my reputation? Lyle is telling everyone I committed career suicide. She laughed, a warm, genuine sound. In my experience, people who create extraordinary things can't be kept down by ordinary gossip. Besides, your mentor speaks very highly of you. That carries weight. When would you want me to start? How about now? I'm having lunch with Kendra at Brighton's in an hour. Join us. The restaurant was quieter than I expected for the middle of the day. Kendra waved from a corner table, where she sat with a woman I assumed was Yvonne, tall, with silver-streaked dark hair and intensely focused eyes. There she is, Kendra said, standing to hug me. The woman who brought down Project Wayfinder with 3 mouse clicks. I didn't bring it down. I clarified, taking a seat. I just took back what was mine. Yvonne nodded approvingly. An important distinction. Tell me exactly what happened. Over lunch, I explained everything, from the development of my algorithm to the subtle ways I'd been sidelined, culminating in being excluded from the launch. And the device won't function without your navigation method? Yvonne asked. No. They could potentially develop an alternative, but it would take months, and they'd lose their market advantage. Which explains why their lawyer contacted me this morning, Kendra interjected. They want to arrange a meeting. They're claiming you stole proprietary information. My stomach tightened. That's impossible. I have documentation proving I developed the algorithm before joining. Of course you do. Kendra patted my hand. But they're desperate. The launch was very public, and the failure even more so. They need a scapegoat or a miracle, preferably both. What should I do? Yvonne set down her water glass deliberately. Meet with them. Listen to what they offer. Then walk away. Just walk away? After everything they did? Sometimes, Kendra said, the most powerful position is to show people exactly what they've lost. 2 days later, I found myself back in the same conference room where Lyle had told me I wasn't welcome at the launch. The energy couldn't have been more different. The executive team sat clustered at one end, their body language tense. Lyle wouldn't meet my eyes. The CEO, Damaris, whom I'd only met twice before, did most of the talking. We believe there's been a misunderstanding, she began. Really? I kept my voice neutral. Which part was misunderstood? When Lyle told me I wasn't welcome at the launch, or when he discussed phasing me out after stealing my intellectual property. Damaris glanced sharply at Lyle, whose face reddened. We value your contributions, she continued. The launch, difficulties, have made us realize how integral you are to the project. We're prepared to offer you a substantial promotion, equity in the company, and full credit for the navigation technology. I nodded thoughtfully. That's generous. May I see the specifics? She slid a folder across the table. The offer was impressive on paper. Triple my previous salary, a vice president title, and 5% equity. They were desperate. I closed the folder and slid it back. I appreciate the offer, but I've accepted a position elsewhere. The room tensed immediately. You can't take our technology to a competitor, Lyle blurted. It's not your technology, I corrected him. As my contract clearly states, the navigation algorithm remains my intellectual property, with usage rights granted to the company, rights I've now revoked. We're prepared to take legal action, Damaris warned. I smiled slightly. I welcome that. My documentation is extensive, including recordings of conversations where Lyle specifically discussed taking credit for my work and removing me from the project after launch. The silence that followed was profound. Recording conversations wasn't illegal in our state with single-party consent, and they knew it. What do you want? Damaris finally asked. Nothing from you. I've already found a position where my work will be valued for what it can do, not who can take credit for it. As I stood to leave, Lyle spoke up. The Globetrotter partnerships. We need those contacts. I paused at the door. You should have thought of that before telling me I wasn't welcome at the launch. Walking out of that building for the final time felt like shedding a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. My phone buzzed with a text from Yvonne. How did it go? Exactly as you predicted, I replied. Good. Your team is ready to meet you tomorrow. 9 a.m. My team. 2 words I hadn't anticipated hearing so soon. The Artemis Group occupied the top floors of a renovated industrial building across town. Unlike my previous company's sterile corporate environment, Artemis embraced an open, collaborative space filled with plants and natural light. Yvonne met me in the lobby. Ready to meet your people. She led me to a bright conference room where 5 people waited, 3 women and 2 men, all with the focused expressions of people who loved solving problems. This is Finola, Yvonne introduced me, the navigation specialist I told you about. She's leading our new disaster response initiative. A woman with bright eyes and a quick smile extended her hand first. I'm Tanvi, communications expert. Your navigation method is exactly what we've been looking for. One by one, they introduced themselves. Jasper, satellite systems analyst. Orla, software integration. Hudson, hardware design. And Maeve, field testing coordinator. We've been developing emergency response systems for 3 years, Orla explained. But location accuracy has been our biggest hurdle, especially in areas with damaged infrastructure. Show her the prototype, Yvonne suggested. Hudson pulled out a device roughly the size of a deck of cards. We call it Beacon. It's designed to work when nothing else does, guiding rescue teams or dropping supply packages with precision. But our current navigation system fails about 40% of the time in extreme conditions. I turned the device over in my hands, already seeing how my algorithm could be adapted. I can fix that, but I want to go further, make it smaller, more energy efficient. That's why you're here, Yvonne said. This is your project now. Full credit, full control. For the next 3 months, we worked intensively, refining Beacon into something extraordinary. My algorithm integrated perfectly, enhancing the device's capabilities beyond what even I had imagined. We tested it in increasingly challenging conditions, dense forests, mountain ranges, storm systems, and it performed flawlessly. The team dynamic was transformative after my previous experience. Ideas flowed freely, with credit given wherever it was due. When problems arose, we solved them together, without politics or posturing. Exactly 90 days after joining Artemis, we prepared for our first field demonstration with potential partners from international aid organizations. Unlike my previous company's focus on wealthy adventurers, these partners would put Beacon where it mattered most: disaster zones, conflict areas, remote communities needing medical supplies. The night before the demonstration, I received an unexpected email from Aster at North Star Expeditions, one of the Globetrotter companies whose partnership I'd canceled. Heard you're doing something meaningful with your navigation tech. Our clients keep asking about the device you showed us. Your old company tried to approach us with something similar, but it doesn't work half as well. Would you consider meeting? I forwarded it to Yvonne with a question mark. Her reply came minutes later. Your call. Luxury market isn't our focus, but additional revenue streams support humanitarian work. I decided to invite Aster to our demonstration. Why not let him see what the technology could really do? The morning of the demonstration arrived with perfect clarity, both in weather and in my mind. As I prepared my presentation, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Heard you're showcasing a new device today. Trying to stay relevant after burning bridges? Lyle. I showed the message to Kendra, who had come to support me. She raised an eyebrow. He's still monitoring your moves. That tells you everything. Should I respond? Why waste the energy? Your success today will say everything necessary. The demonstration was scheduled for 10 a.m. in a large field outside the city, where we'd created various scenarios to showcase Beacon's capabilities. As our team made final preparations, I spotted Aster arriving with two colleagues I didn't recognize. Finola. He greeted me with genuine warmth. Your mentor mentioned you were working on something special. These are my associates, Lena and Miguel. They oversee our humanitarian expeditions division. I hadn't known North Star had a humanitarian division. I thought you focused on luxury adventures. That's our profitable arm, Aster explained. But we use that income to fund disaster response and medical supply deliveries in crisis regions. It's less publicized. Yvonne joined us, introducing herself with a firm handshake. Your humanitarian work is precisely why Finola suggested inviting you today. As we walked toward the demonstration area, I noticed a sleek black car pulling into the parking area. Through the windshield, I recognized Damaris, my former CEO, and beside her, Lyle. We have unexpected guests, I murmured to Yvonne. She followed my gaze and shrugged. It's a public demonstration. Let them watch. The field was set up with various stations simulating challenging environments. A dense tree canopy created with camouflage netting, a water feature representing flooded terrain, and a mock rubble pile resembling a collapsed building. At each station, team members were positioned with beacon devices. 30 guests had gathered, representatives from global aid organizations, government agencies, and now, unexpectedly, my former employers. Lyle stood at the back, arms crossed, with an expression of practiced skepticism. I stepped to the front, feeling a momentary flutter of nervousness that dissolved when I looked at my team's encouraging faces. Thank you for coming today. What you're about to see isn't just another navigation device. Beacon represents a fundamental shift in how we locate and reach people in crisis situations. I explained the core technology without technical jargon, focusing instead on practical applications. When infrastructure fails, when cell towers are down, internet is unavailable, and traditional GPS is compromised, Beacon continues functioning with pinpoint accuracy. As I spoke, my team demonstrated at each station. Hudson showed how Beacon could locate and guide rescuers to a victim hidden beneath the mock rubble. Tanvi demonstrated its communication capabilities, sending location data despite signal-blocking materials. Orla showcased its durability by submerging a unit in water while it continued transmitting. Most importantly, I continued, Beacon doesn't just help people find their way. It helps them find each other when it matters most. I glanced toward the back where Lyle was whispering something to Damaris. Their presence bothered me less than I expected. They no longer had power over my work or my worth. The demonstration concluded with a practical challenge. We invited attendees to hide anywhere within the 50-acre testing ground. Each carried a small beacon receiver. Our team, equipped with locator units, would find them, even those who deliberately tried to mask their signals or position themselves in difficult terrain. Within 20 minutes, all participants were located, including Miguel, who had wedged himself into a drainage pipe beneath 6 feet of soil. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Representatives from 3 international aid organizations approached me before I'd even finished thanking everyone for coming. We need this technology in Syria next month, said one. Can it be adapted for aerial drops in flood zones? Asked another. How quickly can you produce 1,000 units? Inquired a third. As I fielded questions, I noticed Aster deep in conversation with Yvonne. They both looked serious, nodding occasionally. Nearby, Lyle and Damaris stood awkwardly, clearly unsure whether to approach me or leave. Kendra appeared at my elbow. Your former boss and his boss look like they've swallowed something sour. I smiled. I'm surprised they came at all. People always want what they can no longer have, she said. Speaking of which, Yvonne asked me to rescue you from this crowd. There's something important to discuss. She led me to a small tent we'd set up as a command center. Inside, Yvonne and Aster were examining spreadsheets on a tablet. There you are, Yvonne said. Aster has an interesting proposal. Aster looked up. North Star wants to fund immediate deployment of 200 beacons for disaster zones in Southeast Asia. We'd purchase them and donate them through our foundation. That's substantial, I said, surprised by the scale. We weren't planning production runs that large for another 6 months. That's the other part of the proposal, Yvonne added. Aster has manufacturing connections that could accelerate production while maintaining quality control. And in exchange, we'd like exclusivity for the luxury adventure market, Aster explained. A separate version of Beacon for our high-end clients. They're willing to pay premium prices, which helps fund the humanitarian deployments. It was a brilliant solution, using wealth to subsidize need. Exactly what my original technology should have done. I'm interested, I said, but I need to discuss it with my team first. They deserve input on any major decision. Yvonne nodded approvingly. That's exactly what I told Aster you'd say. As we exited the tent, I nearly collided with Lyle, who appeared to have been hovering nearby. Finola, he said, with forced casualness. Impressive demonstration. Thank you, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Damaris and I were hoping to speak with you privately. Kendra, still beside me, crossed her arms. About what, exactly? Damaris stepped forward. We'd like to discuss a potential collaboration. Your technology with our market reach. My technology is already reaching the market it was meant for, I said. But you're limiting yourself to niche applications. Lyle argued. We still have the infrastructure to mass produce for consumer markets. We could make this accessible to everyday users, not just disaster scenarios. I considered his words. There was some truth to them. Wider distribution could help more people, but I remembered how they'd treated my work before, how they'd tried to erase me from it. Send a formal proposal to Yvonne, I finally said. We'll review it alongside other partnership opportunities. Damaris looked relieved, but Lyle frowned. You're really going to make us jump through corporate hoops? After everything we've been through together? Yes, I replied simply, because what we went through together taught me the value of proper process and documentation. As they walked away, Kendra squeezed my shoulder. You've grown. Is that your subtle way of saying you're proud of me? Nothing subtle about it. I'm explicitly proud. And over the next 6 months, Beacon transformed from prototype to life-saving reality. We partnered with Aster's network for manufacturing, creating 2 versions, the standard humanitarian model and a premium adventure edition that helped finance our broader mission. We did eventually collaborate with my former company, but on strictly limited terms. They became one distribution channel among many, with clearly defined boundaries and ownership recognition. Lyle was notably absent from all negotiations. I later heard he'd been transferred to a different division after internal investigations into his management practices. The real validation came 9 months after our first demonstration. A massive earthquake struck a remote region, destroying infrastructure and leaving thousands stranded. Traditional rescue methods were failing due to landslides and damaged roads. An aid organization deployed 50 beacons via helicopter drops. Over the next week, rescue teams located 217 survivors who would otherwise have been unreachable. Among them were 43 children from a school buried by a landslide, all found alive because their teacher had activated the beacon from beneath the rubble. When the rescued children's images appeared on international news, I gathered my team to watch together. No one spoke as footage showed the first child emerging from the debris, clutching a rescue worker's hand. Then Tanvi began to cry quietly. That's why we do this, Hudson whispered. In that moment, the petty office politics and credit stealing of my past seemed impossibly small. This was what my algorithm had been meant for all along. A week later, I received an unexpected email. You probably don't remember me. I'm Erin from your old team. I wanted you to know that what you created is saving lives, and some of us always knew it was your work that made it possible. The kids from the earthquake, that was your vision. No one can take that from you. I remembered Erin clearly. She'd been the first to recognize the potential of my algorithm before Lyle started claiming credit. I replied, "Thank you, Erin. If you're ever looking for a new opportunity, reach out. We're expanding." She joined our team 2 months later, bringing valuable insights from her experience. When I asked why she'd left her previous position, she smiled wryly. After watching what happened with you, I realized I wanted to work somewhere my contributions would be valued, not appropriated. Her words reminded me of something Kendra had told me long ago. Your worth isn't determined by those who failed to see it. On the 1-year anniversary of Beacon's launch, we held a celebration at Artemis headquarters. The walls were covered with photos from successful deployments, disaster zones, remote medical deliveries, rescue operations. Each image represented lives touched by our technology. During the celebration, Yvonne pulled me aside. There's someone who wants to meet you. She led me to her office, where an older woman waited, elegant, with wise eyes that seemed to see right through me. This is Dr. Eleanor Voss, Yvonne introduced us. She founded Artemis 30 years ago. I extended my hand, immediately starstruck. Dr. Voss was legendary in technological innovation circles, though she rarely made public appearances. Your beacon has exceeded my expectations, she said, clasping my hand warmly. Yvonne was right about you. Thank you, I managed. It's been a team effort. The best innovations always are, she agreed. But it takes a special kind of leader to transform personal setback into universal benefit. Not everyone can turn betrayal into blessing. Her words struck deep. I had never framed my journey that way, from exclusion to innovation, from rejection to revolution. I didn't set out for revenge, I admitted. Of course not, she smiled. Revenge is small. What you did was reclaim your power and use it for something greater than yourself. That's not revenge. That's rebirth. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, I found a quiet moment alone. My phone buzzed with a message from Kendra, stepping out early. Remember when you first told me about your navigation algorithm? You said you wanted to create something that helps people find their way when they're lost. You've done that, in more ways than one. I looked around at my team, now 20 strong and growing, laughing together, celebrating our shared accomplishment. I thought about the lives saved, the partnerships forged, the future innovations already taking shape. The ultimate vindication wasn't proving Lyle wrong. It wasn't watching my former company scramble to recover. It wasn't even the success of Beacon itself. It was finding my true path, one guided not by bitterness over being excluded, but by clarity about where I belonged. Sometimes, the most powerful response to "you're not welcome" is simply to create something better elsewhere. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming exactly who you were meant to be. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more tales of resilience and triumph. Your comments mean the world to me. I'd love to know what resonated with you or what other stories you'd like to hear. Thank you for listening to my journey from exclusion to innovation. Remember, sometimes the wrong door closing leads you exactly where you're meant to be. Effective immediately, you're terminated. Enjoy your vacation. The text message burned on my screen as Santorini's sunrise painted the horizon pink. Day 2 of my honeymoon, and my boss's daughter had decided I was disposable. Everything okay? My husband lowered his coffee cup, studying my face. I smiled. Perfectly fine. For 3 years, I'd revolutionized how the company handled its high-stress projects, not through rigid systems, but through what I called emotional forecasting, anticipating how pressure affected different team members and adjusting accordingly. Under my approach, burnout vanished, and delivery success jumped 94%. The founder championed my methods. Her daughter, who arrived 2 months ago with her management certificate, called it coddling. We need tougher teams, not hand-holding, she announced during our first meeting, barely glancing up from her expensive watch. Real business isn't about feelings. What she couldn't comprehend, my approach wasn't soft. It was strategically human. I prevented problems before they manifested by understanding what made people thrive under pressure. I watched her systematic campaign against me unfold, my team meetings labeled excessive, my input increasingly ignored, my success metrics reframed as coincidental. So before my wedding, I made one adjustment, not sabotage, that would harm people I respected. I simply stopped my daily practice of quiet intervention, those tiny moments where I prevented emotional wildfires before they sparked. I set my phone to silent and joined my husband by the infinity pool. 6 hours later, I discovered 47 missed calls from the founder herself. When I finally answered, her voice trembled with urgency. What's happening? 3 major project teams have completely unraveled. Nobody's communicating. 2 team leads threatened to quit mid-delivery. I'm no longer employed there, I replied calmly. My daughter. She didn't consult me. She doesn't understand what you actually do here. Before I continue, if you're finding this story valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything, and it helps others find content like this. If you've ever been underestimated at work, drop a comment. I read every single one and would love to hear your experiences. Now, back to what happened next. My name is Astrid. I'm not what you'd picture when thinking of a corporate power player. I stand 5'3" with curly hair. I never learned to tame properly, and a fondness for vintage brooches that clash spectacularly with modern business attire. My colleagues used to joke that I looked more like an eccentric art teacher than someone who handled million-dollar client projects. What they didn't understand was my mind, specifically, how I processed human dynamics. Since childhood, I've mapped emotional patterns the way some people see mathematical equations. I notice when someone's tone shifts by the slightest degree, when someone's shoulder tension indicates brewing frustration, when team enthusiasm is genuine versus performative. My first job after college was at a small tech startup where I was hired as a project coordinator. Within months, I noticed something peculiar. Projects succeeded or failed, not based on technical merit, but on human friction points that nobody addressed. A developer who felt unappreciated would subtly delay deliverables. A client service representative who felt disrespected in meetings would gradually communicate less critical information. I began making tiny interventions. A 2-minute conversation here, a reconfigured meeting structure there. Soon, our completion rates soared. The founder, Madeline, noticed immediately. A brilliant innovator in her 60s with silver-streaked black hair and fierce intelligence. She called me into her office. Whatever you're doing, I want you to do more of it. Build it into something we can replicate. That began my real career. I developed what I called pressure point prevention, a methodology for maintaining peak team performance during high-stress projects. It wasn't about making people happy. It was about removing the invisible barriers that prevented exceptional work. For 3 years, Madeline gave me freedom to refine this approach. Our company tripled in size. Our client retention hit 96%. We became known for delivering under impossible deadlines without burning out our teams. Then Isabella arrived. Madeline's daughter had spent 5 years at a prestigious consulting firm before deciding to join what she called the family business. At 32, Isabella was polished, Harvard-educated, and utterly convinced that corporate success came from rigid discipline, not human understanding. Mom's generation believes in this touchy-feely stuff, she told me during our first one-on-one, her manicured nails tapping impatiently on her leather portfolio. But I've studied best practices at global firms. I'm here to modernize our approach. I tried explaining that my system wasn't about feelings. It was about strategic human performance optimization. She cut me off. Let's move forward with metrics we can actually measure. The conflict between us was immediate but understated. Isabella never directly attacked my work. She simply began undermining it through 1,000 paper cuts. My weekly emotion mapping sessions with project teams, unnecessary meeting bloat. My custom workflow adjustments for different personality types, inconsistent standards. My conflict prevention discussions, time that could be spent on deliverables. Madeline noticed our tension but seemed reluctant to intervene. She needs to find her place here. Give her time to understand our culture. What Madeline didn't realize was how quickly Isabella was consolidating power. She built alliances with the board by presenting my emotional intelligence work as outdated compared to her data-driven approach. She hired 3 former colleagues who shared her philosophy. She gradually took over client relationships, positioning herself as the true future of the company. 2 weeks before my wedding, Isabella called an all-hands meeting. I wasn't invited to. A sympathetic colleague texted me afterward. She announced a new project management framework that's replacing yours, said it was fully supported by leadership. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by half-packed honeymoon luggage, and made a difficult choice. I wouldn't fight back in any way that harmed the company or my colleagues. But I also wouldn't protect a system that was actively rejecting me. So I stopped. Not dramatically, not completely, just enough. I stopped sending my morning pulse check messages that prevented team conflicts before they erupted. I stopped my practice of personally connecting with struggling team members before their performance declined. I stopped my subtle meeting interventions that kept projects from derailing during tense client discussions. In essence, I just did the job Isabella thought I had, routine project management, without the unnecessary human element. As I stared at the termination text on my honeymoon, something unexpected happened. Instead of anger or hurt, I felt a strange sense of relief. The constant battle to validate my approach had exhausted me. "What are you thinking?" my husband asked, watching me place the phone face down on the infinity pool's edge. I was about to answer when the hotel phone rang. The concierge informed me that my office was trying urgently to reach me. I declined the call. "Nothing important," I told my husband, taking his hand. "Let's enjoy breakfast." Little did I know that back home, the company was experiencing what would later be called the collapse. Throughout that day in Santorini, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Colleagues, board members, even clients somehow found my personal number. I silenced them all and focused on the breathtaking views of the caldera with my new husband. "I've never seen you ignore work before," Jason said, genuine concern in his voice as we explored whitewashed streets. "Should I be worried? For once in my life, I'm prioritizing us," I replied, lacing my fingers through his. "Whatever's happening will still be there when we return." What was happening, as I would later learn, was nothing short of catastrophic. The day after I was fired, 3 major client projects simultaneously reached critical stress points. Under normal circumstances, I would have recognized the warning signs weeks earlier: the slight tension in voice messages, the delayed responses to key questions, the subtle defensiveness in status updates. In each case, I would have made nearly invisible adjustments, reassigning certain team members, restructuring communication channels, or having private conversations with key stakeholders. None of these interventions appeared in any process document. They existed solely in my understanding of human dynamics. Without these interventions, natural tensions escalated into full-blown crises. On the McIntyre account, 2 team leads with conflicting work styles had a shouting match during a client presentation. The client, witnessing this breakdown, immediately placed their $3 million project on hold. The Rosewood Initiative spiraled when a detail-oriented analyst clashed with a big-picture strategist. Their dispute spilled into client communications, creating confusion that led the client to question the entire project foundation. And the Wheeler launch, the company's most prestigious project, derailed when team exhaustion led to a critical error in the final deliverable, something I had always prevented by rotating high-pressure tasks among team members based on their stress resilience patterns. By nightfall of the first day, Madeline had called an emergency board meeting. By the second day, 2 clients had threatened to terminate their contracts. By the third day, several key team members had started updating their resumes. Isabella, who had positioned herself as the solution to my supposedly soft approach, found herself completely overwhelmed. Her rigid systems offered no flexibility to address the human elements unraveling before her. On my 4th day in Santorini, I finally answered Madeline's call. "Astrid, I don't understand what's happening." Her voice cracked with exhaustion. Everything was working perfectly, and now it's like the entire organization forgot how to function. I sat on our private terrace, watching the sunset paint the sea gold. "Nothing has changed, except one element. You," she said quietly. "Not exactly," I corrected her. "Your daughter removed the invisible infrastructure I built." She thought she was eliminating unnecessary coddling. She was actually removing the foundation everything else rested on. The line went silent for several moments. "I need you back," Madeline finally said. "Name your terms." "I'm on my honeymoon," I reminded her. "Isabella was wrong to terminate you. The board has already overturned her decision. Please, Astrid, we're losing clients." I closed my eyes, feeling the warm Aegean breeze on my skin. "I'll think about it." After hanging up, I explained everything to Jason. He listened without interrupting, then asked the question that would change everything. "Do you want to go back to a place that didn't value you until everything fell apart?" His question struck me with unexpected force. For 3 years, I'd poured my heart into building something extraordinary, only to have it dismissed as unnecessary by someone who couldn't understand it. "Maybe this is your chance to build something of your own," Jason continued. "Something where your name is on the door." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on our balcony until dawn, thinking not about revenge, but about possibility. What if I could create a place where my approach was the foundation, not an afterthought? By morning, I had made my decision. When Madeline called again, I answered with newfound clarity. I'm not coming back as an employee. What are you saying? Alarm edged her voice. I'm offering you a choice. Your company can become my first client, or your competitors can. The silence on the line told me she understood the significance of what I was proposing. You're starting your own consulting practice. It wasn't a question. I've spent years developing a methodology that works. Isabella didn't value it because she couldn't see it, but you can see the results of its absence. What happened next surprised me. Instead of negotiation or resistance, Madeline laughed, a genuine, relieved sound I hadn't expected. You know what's ironic, Astrid? I've been waiting for you to realize your true value for years. I just didn't expect it would take my daughter's short-sightedness to make it happen. We spent the next hour outlining a consulting agreement that would allow me to stabilize their immediate crisis while establishing my own company. I would train their teams in my methodology but maintain ownership of the approach. They would become a case study for my future clients. When we finally ended the call, Jason was watching me with pride. So you're a founder now? Apparently, I said, still processing this unexpected turn. What will you call your company? I thought for a moment about the essence of what I'd built, the ability to see beneath surface tensions, to the human currents driving organizational success or failure. Undercurrent, I decided, because what truly matters in business is what flows beneath the visible surface. We spent the remainder of our honeymoon alternating between romantic moments and business planning. I drafted the framework for my methodology, created training modules, and outlined how I would structure client engagements. When we returned home, Madeline had arranged an all-hands meeting. As I walked into the familiar conference room, the tension was palpable. Isabella sat rigidly beside her mother, her expression unreadable. Madeline stood to address the room. Most of you have experienced the challenges of the past 2 weeks. Today, we're announcing a strategic partnership that will address these issues and strengthen our approach going forward. As she introduced me as the founder of Undercurrent Consulting, Isabella's face flushed red. When the applause died down, Madeline continued with something unexpected. My daughter Isabella will be working closely with Astrid to integrate these methodologies across all our teams. Isabella's head snapped toward her mother, genuine shock breaking through her composed facade. I hadn't requested this arrangement, but immediately recognized Madeline's strategy. This wasn't punishment, it was education. Isabella needed to understand what I had built before she could lead effectively. After the meeting, Isabella cornered me in the hallway. I want to be clear, I don't need a babysitter. Good, I replied calmly, because I'm not here to babysit. I'm here to reveal an invisible architecture you've been trying to dismantle without seeing. Her eyes narrowed. My methods are proven. In stable environments, perhaps, but high-pressure delivery requires understanding human dynamics at a level your frameworks don't address. That's just measurable, I interrupted. The past 2 weeks have measured exactly what happens when those dynamics are ignored. Something shifted in her expression. Not surrender, but perhaps the first crack in her certainty. 1 month, she said finally. I'll give your approach 1 month to prove itself. What Isabella didn't realize was that 1 month was more than enough time to demonstrate the power of what I'd built. But the real revelation would come from what I discovered during my first week back. Information that would transform not just my relationship with Isabella, but the entire future of the company. Because hidden in the project files Isabella had taken over was evidence of something no one had noticed. Something that explained her aggressive campaign against me and revealed a vulnerability in the company's foundation that even Madeline didn't suspect. I waited until late evening to begin reviewing the project files. The office stood empty, the silence punctuated only by the hum of the HVAC system. For hours, I combed through reports, communications, and planning documents. At first glance, everything appeared normal. Timelines, resource allocations, client requirements, but something felt off. Isabella had reorganized everything according to her preferred system, yet certain gaps emerged in the narrative flow. Near midnight, I discovered the first anomaly, a client meeting recap that referenced discussions not documented anywhere else. Following this thread led me to a hidden folder buried within a seemingly unrelated archive. What I found made my heart race. Isabella hadn't come to the company simply to gain experience in the family business. She'd been sent to investigate potential acquisition targets, and our company topped the list. Her previous employer, a massive corporate giant known for consuming smaller innovators, had tasked her with assessing our methodology, client relationships, and overall value. The termination wasn't personal, it was strategic. With me gone, the company's unique advantage would disappear, dropping its market value significantly. Their acquisition plan was coldly brilliant. Buy low after manufactured instability, absorb our client base, and eliminate a rising competitor. Isabella wasn't just Madeline's daughter. She was the perfect Trojan horse, someone Madeline would never suspect of corporate espionage. I sat back, stunned by the implications. My first instinct was to rush to Madeline with this revelation, but something held me back. The evidence, while compelling, remained circumstantial. Moving too quickly could destroy both the mother-daughter relationship and any chance of addressing the threat strategically. Instead, I decided to use my own methodology, understanding human pressure points, to create change. The next morning, I arrived early to prepare for my first official consulting session with Isabella. She entered precisely on time, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit that screamed corporate armor. "Let's get this over with," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Today," I began, ignoring her tone, "we're going to try something different. I'm going to show you how I analyze team dynamics by having you participate in the process directly." Skepticism flashed across her face, but she nodded curtly. I pulled up the Wheeler project, our most troubled account and one Isabella had been particularly interested in, according to the hidden files. "This client has unique pressure sensitivities," I explained. "Their leadership responds poorly to certain communication styles. Tell me, what approach would you recommend?" She launched into a textbook answer about clear deliverables and accountability metrics. "Interesting," I said, letting silence hang afterward. The lack of affirmation discomforted her, exactly as I'd intended. "What?" she finally asked. "I notice you focus exclusively on process, not on the people implementing it. Because process is replicable and doesn't depend on emotional variables," she replied. "Let's test that theory," I suggested. "I'll show you two approaches with this client, one process-focused and one accounting for the human element." For the next hour, I walked her through actual case studies from the Wheeler account, demonstrating how understanding the client's anxiety around innovation had been key to our success. "Their COO presents as confident but actually fears being blindsided," I explained. When we adjusted our communication to address this hidden concern, project approval time decreased by 67%. Isabella's expression remained neutral, but I noticed her taking unusually detailed notes. "This is just basic psychology," she argued, though with less conviction than before. "It's applied behavioral science in a business context," I corrected. "And it's quantifiable. The approach you dismissed as touchy-feely saved this project 230 billable hours last quarter alone." By session's end, Isabella's defensive posture had subtly shifted. She wasn't convinced, but something had penetrated her certainty. "Same time tomorrow?" I asked pleasantly. She nodded, gathering her materials. As she reached the door, she paused. "My previous firm would consider this approach inefficient." "And how would they measure that efficiency?" I asked. The question hung between us. We both knew the answer: by how quickly they could strip a company's assets after acquisition. "Different metrics," she finally replied before leaving. Over the next 2 weeks, I continued these sessions while quietly gathering more evidence about the acquisition plan. Each day, I exposed Isabella to another facet of my methodology, always demonstrating measurable results. Simultaneously, I began implementing what I called organizational immunology, strengthening the company's structure against external threats without revealing I knew about them. I established proprietary documentation for our methodology, helped Madeline secure additional patents, and restructured client agreements to include loyalty incentives that would make acquisition less attractive. By the third week, Isabella started asking genuine questions during our sessions. The turning point came when a client crisis erupted during our meeting, the perfect opportunity to demonstrate my approach in real time. The Wheeler client was threatening to pull out after receiving what they perceived as dismissive feedback from one of our team leads. Watch, I said, pulling up the communication chain. I quickly identified the escalation pattern, how a simple misinterpretation had triggered the client's insecurity about being respected. Normally, you'd send a carefully worded apology and offer concessions, I noted. Instead, we're going to address the underlying concern. I drafted a response acknowledging their expertise first before addressing the project details, then had our team lead call the client directly with a specific question that demonstrated we valued their insight. This seems manipulative, Isabella observed. It's actually the opposite, I countered. Manipulation ignores true needs for superficial compliance. This approach recognizes and addresses the actual human concern beneath the business issue. Within an hour, the crisis had resolved. The client not only stayed but approved the next project phase ahead of schedule. Isabella sat back, visibly processing what she'd witnessed. This is what happened when you were gone, isn't it? All these hidden connections just collapsed. I nodded. Human systems appear invisible until they break. Later that evening, I received an unexpected text from Isabella. Can we meet tomorrow before the office opens? When I arrived the next morning, she was already waiting. Her usual polished appearance slightly rumpled, suggesting a sleepless night. I need to tell you something, she began, uncharacteristically hesitant. For a moment, I thought she might confess to the acquisition plan. Instead, she revealed something more personal. I failed at my last job, she said quietly. Not officially. My performance reviews were excellent, but I knew I wasn't actually succeeding. Projects completed on time, but teams fell apart afterward. Clients didn't return. I couldn't understand why. She looked up, vulnerability replacing her usual confidence. When Mom kept talking about your amazing results, I was determined to prove success came from rigid structure, not whatever it is you do. Because if you were right, then your entire approach needed rethinking. I finished for her. She nodded. Firing you wasn't just about streamlining management. It was about eliminating evidence that contradicted my worldview. The admission stunned me. While not a confession about the acquisition plot, it revealed an essential truth. Isabella had been threatened not just professionally but personally by my methodology. Why tell me this now? I asked. Because yesterday I watched you solve in minutes what would have taken me weeks, if ever, and you didn't even seem to think it was special. This moment of honesty created an opening I hadn't anticipated. I decided to take a calculated risk. Isabella, I know about the acquisition plan. Her face paled. The same way I know when a client is about to walk away before they say anything. I pay attention to patterns others miss. For several seconds, she sat frozen, her career and relationship with her mother hanging in the balance. Does Mom know? She finally asked. Not yet, and she doesn't need to, depending on what happens next. The implied choice hung between us. Isabella's response surprised me. Instead of denial or defensiveness, she laughed, a short, bitter sound. The irony is, I've been reconsidering whether acquisition is even the right move. What you've shown me these past weeks, it's not replicable through standard corporate integration. Exactly, I said. What makes this company valuable would be destroyed in the process of acquiring it. That morning marked the beginning of an unexpected alliance. Isabella canceled her next 3 calls with her previous employer and spent a full day with me designing an alternative strategy, not for acquisition, but for partnership. When we finally presented to Madeline, we offered not a warning about corporate raiders, but an opportunity for strategic growth. The company that had planned to consume us would instead distribute our methodology through their global network, maintaining our independence while expanding our impact. Madeline studied us both with the shrewd assessment that had built her success. Something has changed between you two. Isabella glanced at me before responding. Let's just say, I've gained perspective on what actually drives business success. The restructured deal tripled the company's valuation within 6 months. My consulting firm expanded to serve clients worldwide, with Isabella eventually joining as a partner, specializing in scaling human-centered methodologies across large organizations. The day she officially resigned from her former employer to join Undercurrent permanently, she handed me a small, wrapped package. Inside was a vintage brooch, a wave-shaped silver piece with inlaid blue stone. For the woman who showed me what flows beneath the surface. The note read. Madeline never learned the full truth about the acquisition attempt. Isabella and I agreed some knowledge serves no purpose except to damage trust that can be rebuilt in better ways. People often ask if I regret not exposing Isabella immediately. I don't. True power isn't found in moments of righteous revelation, but in transforming potential adversaries into allies who truly understand your value. My revenge wasn't firing back at Isabella or embarrassing her to Madeline. My revenge was living well, building something so undeniably effective that even those determined to dismiss it eventually recognized its worth. The greatest victory isn't defeating your opponents. It's having them voluntarily join your cause because they've seen the truth for themselves. If my story resonates with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Share your own experiences in the comments. When has your unique approach been underestimated, and how did you prove its value? I read every comment and would love to connect with others who've transformed dismissal into opportunity. Thank you for listening to my journey from employee to founder, from target to mentor, and from underestimated to undeniable.